The millionaire married for an heir, but his bride changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to the main character. He did not call it a proposal. He called it a solution. The city glowed beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, lights stretching for miles like a kingdom he already owned. At 38, he had everything most people spent a lifetime chasing: power, wealth, control. And yet, that night, his voice was calm, almost emotionless, as he looked across the marble table and said the words that would change 2 lives forever. I need a wife, not for love. I need an heir. There was no ring, no romance, no pretense, just a contract folder resting between them, thick, precise, already prepared. For him, marriage was not a feeling, it was a requirement. Board members had been whispering, his family had been pressuring him. The future of his empire demanded continuity, a name to inherit it all. He had delayed long enough. This was business, nothing more. Across from him sat the woman who had never imagined she would hear a sentence like that in her life. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, fingers pressing into each other to keep them from trembling. The room was too large, too quiet, too expensive. Everything about this place reminded her that she did not belong here. She listened as he explained the terms with surgical precision: a legal marriage, a fixed duration, public appearances, private boundaries, no emotional expectations. And when the time came, a child who would secure his legacy. He spoke as if he were outlining a merger, not offering someone a lifetime role. She should have stood up. She should have walked away. But desperation has a way of silencing pride. Only hours earlier, she had been staring at an eviction notice taped crookedly to her apartment door. Her mother's medical bills were stacked unopened on the kitchen counter. Every choice she had made until now had led her to this moment, sitting in front of a man who could solve all of it with one signature. He noticed her hesitation and mistook it for negotiation. "You will be taken care of," he said, his tone steady, distant. "Financially, permanently. You will never have to worry again. Never have to worry." The words echoed in her chest, heavy and tempting. She thought of sleepless nights, of counting dollars at the grocery store, of pretending she was not afraid. Still, something inside her resisted. "And after?" she asked quietly. He did not hesitate. "After the heir is secured, we go our separate ways." Just like that, no future promised, no place reserved, only a role to be played, then discarded. He slid the folder closer to her. The contract waited. She stared at the lines of legal language, black ink spelling out a life she never planned to live. Somewhere between the clauses and conditions, she realized something terrifying. If she agreed, she would be protected from everything except loneliness. The room felt colder. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that a decision was being weighed that would unravel everything this man thought he controlled. Because what he did not know, what he could not calculate, was that the woman sitting across from him was not empty. She was not weak, and she was not something that could be contained by paper and signatures. He wanted an heir. He never expected a bride who would challenge his rules, disrupt his world, and force him to confront the one thing his wealth had never been able to buy: a heart willing to change. And this was only the beginning. She did not sign the contract that night. She walked out of the penthouse with the folder still resting on the table behind her, the elevator doors closing softly, as if nothing monumental had just been offered. The city air outside felt colder, sharper, more real than the polished silence she had left behind. On the ride home, she stared at her reflection in the dark glass of the train window. Same face, same tired eyes. But now there was a question sitting heavy in her chest. How much of herself was she willing to trade for security? Her apartment greeted her with flickering lights and the familiar hum of a radiator that barely worked. The smell of instant soup lingered in the air. On the kitchen table lay the unopened envelope she had been avoiding for weeks. Red stamps, final notices, medical bills with totals she could not pronounce without shaking. Her phone buzzed. The hospital. She answered before the second ring. Her mother's voice sounded smaller than usual, strained but trying to stay calm. The insurance company had denied another claim. The treatment schedule would need to change. Time was becoming a word with sharp edges. After the call ended, she sat on the edge of the couch and finally let herself feel it. The fear, the exhaustion, the quiet anger at a world where doing everything right still was not enough. That night, sleep did not come easily. Her mind replayed his voice, controlled, certain, as if he had already decided what she would choose. The next morning, she was late to work for the first time in years. She worked at a small non-profit office that helped families navigate housing assistance. The irony was not lost on her. She spent her days helping others stay afloat while she was drowning quietly. At lunch, her supervisor pulled her aside. Funding cuts were coming. Hours might be reduced. Nothing was guaranteed anymore. As she walked back to her desk, her phone buzzed again. A message. No greeting, just a time and an address. Tonight, 8 o'clock. She knew who it was from. She told herself she was only going to talk, only to ask questions, only to understand what she was being asked to give up. At 8 sharp, she returned to the penthouse. This time, he was waiting with 2 cups of coffee instead of contracts. Black, no sugar. "You came," he said, not smiling. "I did not agree to anything," she replied. "I know." He gestured for her to sit. This time, the conversation felt different, slower, more dangerous. She asked about the heir. Why the urgency? Why now? He answered honestly, but not emotionally. His father's will, the board's expectations, a legacy built over decades that could crumble without a clear successor. "I do not have time for uncertainty," he said. She nodded, then surprised both of them. "And what happens to me," she asked, "after I give you what you need?" The question hung between them. "For the duration of the marriage, you will have everything," he said carefully. "After that, you will be free, financially secure, no obligations." Free. The word sounded hollow. She stood up, pacing toward the window, looking out at a life that was not hers. "I am not asking to be loved," she said quietly, "but I will not be treated like a container for someone else's future." For the first time, he looked unsettled. The next day, the eviction notice was replaced with a final warning. The hospital called again. That evening, she opened the contract at her kitchen table. Page after page of certainty, protection, control. She signed, not because she wanted his world, but because she was running out of time in her own. When she returned the signed papers, he nodded once, businesslike. "The wedding will be small," he said, "private, efficient." She looked at the man she had just legally agreed to marry, and neither of them realized that the most dangerous clause in that contract was not written in ink. It was the assumption that hearts could be excluded from the deal. The wedding happened 2 weeks later. No church bells, no aisle lined with flowers, no guests whispering with anticipation. It took place in a quiet private room overlooking the city, with glass walls and a single long table polished to perfection. Efficient. Exactly as he had promised. She stood beside him in a simple white dress chosen by someone else, tailored to fit a role rather than a dream. There was no veil, no bouquet, just a thin band of gold waiting on a velvet cushion. The officiant spoke about commitment and partnership, words that floated past her like background noise. When it was time to say yes, her voice did not shake. "I do." He said the same words, just as calmly. No kiss followed, no applause. The marriage was complete. That night, she moved into the mansion. Her suitcase looked small against the marble floors and sweeping staircase. Staff members greeted her politely, but with curiosity carefully hidden behind professional smiles. She could feel their eyes following her, measuring her worth, wondering how someone like her had ended up here. He handed her a folder as soon as they were alone. Not another contract. A schedule. Public appearances, charity events, family dinners, media obligations. "You will have a private wing," he said. "Your privacy will be respected. We will present ourselves as a united couple when necessary." Necessary. She nodded, absorbing the rules. "And the heir?" she asked. He paused, just long enough for the silence to feel intentional. "When the time comes, we will discuss it," he said. That night, she slept alone in a bedroom larger than her old apartment. The bed was untouched. The sheets smelled new. The silence was so complete it rang in her ears. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how something so luxurious could feel so empty. The next morning began with lessons, etiquette, media training, wardrobe fittings. She learned which fork to use, how to answer questions without revealing too much, how to smile without committing to anything. She listened carefully, memorized everything, and thanked everyone politely. What she did not do was complain. He noticed that. At breakfast, she arrived on time, dressed appropriately, hair pulled back simply. She did not fawn over the space or act impressed by the view. She asked one question. "What time do you usually leave for work?" He looked up, surprised. 6:30, he answered. "Then I will not schedule anything before 7, she said. "I do not want to disrupt your routine." It was a small thing, but it lingered with him longer than he expected. Over the following days, she followed the rules without resistance. She appeared when required. She remained quiet when conversations turned sharp. She endured subtle insults from relatives who assumed she was after money or status. She did not correct them. Instead, she listened. At a family dinner, when his aunt criticized the staff harshly over a minor mistake, she spoke gently. "They have been working since early morning," she said. "I think they did their best." The table went silent. He watched her carefully, waiting for regret or fear to follow. It did not. Later that night, he confronted her in the hallway. "You do not need to involve yourself," he said. "That was unnecessary." "I disagree," she replied calmly. "Respect is not unnecessary." He said nothing. Days turned into weeks. She learned the house. The staff learned her. She thanked people by name. She remembered birthdays. She noticed things he overlooked. One evening, he returned home later than usual, exhausted from a brutal board meeting. He expected an empty house. Instead, he found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, attempting to cook something unfamiliar. "I read that you skip dinner when you are stressed," she said without looking up. "I thought you might eat if someone made it for you." He stood there, silent. This was not in the contract. She did not ask for praise. She did not wait for approval. She simply placed a plate in front of him and walked away. That night, as he sat alone in his office, he opened the contract again. Every clause was intact, every boundary clearly defined. And yet, something was already shifting. He had married for an heir, but the woman who now lived in his house was doing something far more dangerous. She was making it feel like a home. By the third week, the mansion no longer felt like a hotel, not because it was warmer or louder or filled with laughter. It was still quiet, still controlled, still ruled by schedules and silence. But something subtle had changed. She had learned the rhythms of the house, which doors creaked, which lights stayed on too long, which staff members avoided eye contact, and which ones relaxed when she smiled and asked how their day had been. She did not try to belong. She simply existed as herself. That was what unsettled him. He began noticing her in moments that had nothing to do with appearances. Early in the morning, standing barefoot in the kitchen, reading through mail he never opened. Late at night, sitting in the library, not touching the books but tracing the spines as if looking for something familiar. She never entered his office uninvited, never asked about his business, never commented on his wealth. It made him uneasy. One afternoon, she accompanied him to a charity luncheon. Cameras flashed, questions were thrown. She stood beside him, composed, answering carefully when addressed, silent when ignored. A reporter asked how it felt to marry into power. She smiled politely. "I married a person," she said. "Everything else is just noise." The comment made headlines. Back home, he confronted her. "You should have let me handle that," he said, irritation sharp in his voice. "I answered honestly," she replied. "Was that a problem?" He had no answer. Later that evening, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Thunder rattled the windows. The power flickered, then went out entirely. Backup generators kicked in, but not everywhere at once. She was in the east wing when the lights went dark. For a moment, she stood frozen, breath shallow, hands pressed against the wall. Childhood memories surfaced without permission. Darkness, small spaces, fear she had never named out loud. She did not scream. She did not call for help. She sat down on the floor and waited. When he found her minutes later, she was sitting with her knees drawn in, face calm but pale. "The lights will be back," he said. "I know," she answered. He hesitated. "You could have called someone." "I did not want to be a burden," she said quietly. The word hit him harder than he expected. That night he could not sleep. He replayed moments he had dismissed, her silence when insulted, her refusal to demand, her instinct to minimize herself even when she had every legal right to occupy the space she stood in. He realized something uncomfortable. She was not pretending. The next day, his sister visited unannounced. She barely hid her disdain. "So this is her," she said, eyes sweeping her from head to toe. The solution. She braced herself, already familiar with the tone. Before she could respond, he spoke. "Watch your language," he said evenly. His sister laughed. "You are defending her now." "She is my wife," he replied. "That should be enough." The room went quiet. She looked at him surprised. So did he. That evening, they shared a meal without staff for the first time. The food was simple, the conversation hesitant. She told him about her childhood, about learning early how to read a room, about becoming invisible to survive. He listened, not as a businessman, as a man. "I never had to disappear," he admitted. "I learned to dominate instead." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to her. In the days that followed, the lines blurred. He began asking her opinion, about art in the house, about the foundation events, about nothing important at all. She began laughing more, quietly, carefully. One evening, as they passed each other in the hallway, their hands brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. It was not romantic, not dramatic, but it lingered. Later, alone in his office, he stared at the contract again. The rules were clear, the boundaries intact. Yet somehow, without breaking a single clause, she had crossed into territory he had sworn no one would reach. This was no longer just a marriage of convenience. It was becoming something that scared him far more than failure. Because for the first time in his life, he was not sure control was what he wanted to keep. The gala was meant to be routine, another charity event, another ballroom filled with crystal lights, tailored suits, and conversations that sounded warm but meant very little. He had attended hundreds like it. He knew the rules. Smile, donate, leave early. This one was different. It was the first major public appearance they were making together since the wedding, and everyone knew it. Cameras lined the entrance. Reporters whispered. Board members watched closely, measuring every step, every glance. She stood beside him in a deep blue gown, elegant without trying to compete. Her posture was calm, her expression neutral. She did not cling to his arm. She did not look overwhelmed. She looked present. As they entered the room, conversations slowed, heads turned. The curiosity was unmistakable. This was the woman, the one no one had been able to place. During dinner, subtle tests began. A board member leaned over, voice coated in politeness. "It must be overwhelming, marrying into this world so suddenly." She smiled lightly. "Change is overwhelming when you resist it." The man laughed, uncertain. Across the table, another guest commented on how fortunate she was. "Not many people get opportunities like this." She nodded. "Opportunity comes with responsibility. I try to remember that." He watched her carefully. She was not defensive, not arrogant, not grateful in the way people expected her to be. She was simply steady. Then came the moment no one had planned for. The foundation director took the stage to speak about upcoming initiatives. Halfway through the speech, a major donor interrupted loudly, criticizing the organization for funding community programs instead of focusing solely on high-visibility projects. The room tensed. Everyone knew the donor was important, powerful, untouchable. Silence followed. He felt the familiar instinct rise in him, damage control, smooth it over, move on. Before he could stand, she did. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. "I apologize," she said calmly, addressing the room, "but the reason these programs matter is because visibility means nothing if lives do not change." Eyes turned toward her. She continued, steady and composed. "My work before marriage was with families one paycheck away from losing everything. When you fund these programs, you are not buying good publicity. You are buying time, dignity, possibility." The donor scoffed. "And what would you know about that?" She met his gaze. "I know what it feels like to need help and not know if it will come." The room went quiet. He felt something tighten in his chest. This was not rehearsed. This was not strategic. This was her. The foundation director stepped back, visibly relieved. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then stronger. The donor said nothing more. Later, as they stood near the balcony overlooking the city, he spoke quietly. "You should not have done that." She did not turn to face him. "I know," she said. "This could have consequences. I know that too." He waited for her to apologize. She did not. Instead, she said, "If I am going to stand beside you, I will not do it silently when something matters." The words struck deeper than criticism ever could. For the rest of the night, people approached her, not out of curiosity, but respect. Staff members thanked her quietly. A young volunteer wiped away tears. He watched it all unfold, something shifting with every interaction. This was not a liability. This was leadership. On the drive home, neither spoke. Back at the mansion, he stopped her before she went to her wing. "You embarrassed a man who could hurt the foundation," he said. She looked at him calmly. "And you would have let him," she replied, "because it was easier." The truth landed between them. He exhaled slowly. "You were right," he said finally. The admission surprised them both. That night, he did not open the contract. He did not look at schedules or appearances. He lay awake, thinking about a woman who had just passed a test no one knew they were giving her, including him. She had entered the marriage as a solution, but tonight, in front of everyone who mattered, she had proven something else entirely. She was not here to inherit his world. She was here to challenge it. The night after the gala did not end when the car doors closed. It followed them home. The mansion was quiet, the kind of silence that usually settled him. Tonight, it felt charged, as if the walls themselves were waiting. She went to the kitchen first, slipping off her heels, placing them neatly by the door. He watched from a distance, unsure why he did not retreat to his office like he always did after public events. "You handled yourself well," he said finally. She paused, then nodded. "Thank you." It was the first time he had thanked her for something that was not procedural. She poured herself a glass of water, hands steady, movements unhurried. There was no trace of triumph in her, no expectation of praise. That unsettled him more than applause ever could. "You were not afraid," he said. She looked at him then. Really looked. "I was terrified," she replied softly. "I just did not think silence was the right choice." They stood there, the distance between them smaller than it had ever been, yet filled with things neither had named. "I have spent my life avoiding fear," he admitted, buying distance from it, outsmarting it. "And did it work?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. "No," he said finally. "It only made everything quieter." She nodded, as if she understood that kind of quiet too well. They moved to the sitting room without discussing it, sitting across from each other, no longer hiding behind formality. The city lights flickered through the windows, casting shadows that felt softer now. "I did not expect this," she said. "Any of it." "Neither did I," he replied. The admission surprised him. It felt like loosening a tie he had worn too tight for too long. She hesitated, then spoke again, her voice careful. "I know this marriage started as an arrangement. I accepted that. But I need to ask you something." He straightened slightly. "When this ends," she continued, "will you pretend it never mattered?" The question was not an accusation. It was a vulnerability offered without defense. He felt something shift, something unfamiliar and unwelcome. "I do not know," he said honestly. "I planned for an outcome, not for this." She smiled faintly. "Neither did I." Silence settled again, but this time it was not empty. A sudden clap of thunder echoed outside, followed by rain against the glass. She flinched before she could stop herself, shoulders tightening. He noticed. "Are you all right?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Storms remind me of things I do not like to remember." He did not press. He simply stood, moved closer, not touching, but present. "You do not have to disappear here," he said quietly. "Not with me." The words surprised both of them. She exhaled slowly, tension easing from her frame. "Thank you," she said. For the first time, gratitude did not sound like obligation. That night, when they said goodnight, neither retreated completely. Doors remained slightly open, lights dimmed, not shut off. In his room, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. He realized something that made his chest tighten. He was no longer thinking about heirs or timelines. He was thinking about how she listened, how she spoke when it mattered. how the house felt different when she was awake in it. This was not part of the contract, and that frightened him more than any risk he had ever taken, because for the first time, the idea of losing control felt less terrifying than the idea of losing her. The shift came quietly, not with shouting or confrontation, but with paperwork. It started with an email sent to the board late one evening, copied to every major stakeholder and legal advisor. The subject line was harmless enough: clarification regarding the marriage agreement. By morning, it was everywhere. Whispers filled the corridors of his headquarters. Phones rang longer than usual. Meetings were postponed, then rescheduled behind closed doors. By noon, the implication was clear. The marriage contract had been leaked. Not the whole thing, just enough. A clause highlighted, a sentence taken out of context, the words "fixed term" and "heir arrangement" circled in red. By the time he returned home that evening, the narrative had already formed without him. She was a scheme, a calculated move, a woman paid to secure a legacy. He found her in the sitting room, standing by the window, phone still in her hand. Her face was calm, but her eyes were distant, as if she were looking far past the glass. "You knew," she said before he could speak. "It is not what it looks like," he replied quickly. She turned slowly. "Then tell me what it is." He hesitated. That pause was enough. "I defended you," she continued quietly. "I stood in rooms where people questioned my worth. I believed you when you said this was clean. Honest." "It was," he insisted. "It is." "Then why did I have to find out from strangers," she asked, "that my marriage is being discussed like a hostile takeover?" The words cut deeper than anger would have. "This was never meant to hurt you," he said. She nodded. "I believe that. But intentions do not erase consequences." He reached for the contract on the table, flipping it open as if the pages could explain themselves. "This document does not define us," he said. "What has happened between us is real." She looked at the pages he held, then back at him. "Is it?" she asked softly. "Or did I imagine that too?" Before he could answer, his sister entered the room without knocking. "This is a disaster," she said sharply. "The board wants answers. The press is circling. You need to distance yourself from her immediately." She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply stepped back. "I understand," she said. He turned to her, alarmed. "No, that is not what I want." "But it is what you need," she replied. She walked past him, stopping only once. "I was prepared to be part of an arrangement," she said. "What I was not prepared for was being reduced to one." The next morning she left the mansion. No announcement, no confrontation, just a note left on the kitchen counter. "I will not stay where my presence becomes a liability. Take care of your world." The house felt larger than ever. At work, the pressure mounted. Lawyers advised caution. Board members suggested annulment. Every solution involved sacrifice. Of her. He sat alone in his office long after everyone had gone home. The contract spread out in front of him. For the first time, he read it not as protection, but as evidence. This document had shielded his empire, and it had cost him the one thing he had never planned for. He realized the truth with painful clarity. He could keep his control, or he could fight for her, but he could not do both. He made his decision before sunrise. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock. Lawyers had prepared statements. Advisors had lined up arguments about optics, risk, and damage control. Every option on the table led to the same conclusion: end the marriage quietly, protect the empire, move on. He listened to none of it. At 9 sharp, he walked into the boardroom carrying only one document. Not a presentation, not a defense, the marriage contract. He did not sit. "This ends today," he said, placing the folder on the table. Murmurs spread instantly. One of the senior directors leaned forward. "You cannot be serious. This contract is the foundation of stability." "It was," he replied. "It is now the problem." He opened the folder and slid a prepared statement across the table. "I am formally dissolving the agreement and withdrawing all clauses related to succession requirements imposed by this marriage." Silence followed. "You will destabilize everything," someone said. "The market will react." "Then let it," he answered. "If my company cannot survive without controlling a woman's life, it deserves to be challenged." The words landed hard. By the time the meeting ended, consequences were already unfolding. Stock would dip. Investors would panic. His name would be questioned. For the first time, he did not care. He left the building and did not return to his office. Instead, he drove. The city blurred past as he replayed every moment he had missed, every hesitation that had pushed her away. He did not know where she had gone. He only knew where she would feel safest, the nonprofit office. He found her there late in the afternoon, alone, sorting donated supplies. No makeup, hair pulled back. The version of her that existed before contracts and galas. She froze when she saw him. "I am not here to explain," he said quickly, "or to ask for forgiveness." She crossed her arms, guarded but calm. "Then why are you here?" He took a breath he had never practiced taking. "I ended it," he said. "The contract, the conditions, all of it." Her eyes flickered. "I chose you," he continued, "not because it was easy, because it was right." She shook her head slowly. "You chose too late." "Maybe," he admitted, "but I am choosing honestly now." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the document. Not the contract, a letter. "I resigned from the board position that tied my leadership to an heir clause," he said. "I will rebuild whatever comes next without sacrificing someone else to do it." She stared at him, stunned. "You would give up everything?" she asked. "I already did," he replied, "when I let you walk away." Silence stretched between them, fragile and heavy. "This is not a proposal," he said softly. "It is not a deal. It is a truth." He placed the letter on the table between them. "I love you, and I will walk away if that is what you need. But I will not hide behind contracts ever again." She looked down at the paper, then back at him. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice was steady. "You cannot fix this with sacrifice alone," she said. "You fix it by staying." He nodded. "Then I will stay, however you allow me to." For the first time since they met, there were no clauses left to negotiate, only a choice. And this time, it was mutual. The contract ended on a quiet morning. No cameras, no statements, no applause. He signed the final paperwork alone in his study, the same place where the marriage agreement had once been drafted with ruthless precision. When the last signature was complete, he did not feel relief. He felt lighter. He placed the old contract into a folder, not to be destroyed, but to be closed. Some things deserved to be remembered exactly as they were, so they would never be repeated. That afternoon, he went to her apartment. Not the mansion, not the penthouse. Her place. It was small, modest, warm. Sunlight spilled through thin curtains, touching worn furniture and stacks of books on the floor. This was where she had returned to rebuild herself without him. She opened the door slowly. "You came," she said. "I promised I would stay," he replied. He did not step inside until she moved aside and let him. They sat at the small kitchen table, knees almost touching. No lawyers, no schedules, no witnesses. "I do not want a life where I am protected but unheard," she said. "I do not want to disappear again." "You will not," he answered. "Not with me." This time, there were no conditions attached. Weeks passed. The world adjusted. His company stabilized, not without cost, but stronger in ways numbers could not measure. He stepped down from roles that demanded silence and kept those that allowed change. The board learned to adapt, and slowly, quietly, they learned how to be something new, not a headline, not a strategy, just two people choosing each other without obligation. One evening, he invited her to the place where everything had begun. The penthouse was different now, less severe, softer. Art on the walls she had chosen. A dining table moved closer to the windows. As the city lights came on, he took her hand. "This is not about legacy," he said. "It never should have been." He reached into his pocket and removed a ring. Simple, unremarkable, honest. "I do not need an heir," he continued. "I need a partner, someone who will challenge me, stand with me, and walk away if I ever forget who I am." He knelt. "Will you marry me again?" he asked, this time without contracts, without fear, without an ending planned in advance. She covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. "Yes," she said, "I will." They married again months later. No press, no pressure, just friends, chosen family. laughter that came easily. As they stood together, she caught sight of something framed quietly in the corner of the room. The old contract, signed, void, final. Not a symbol of shame, but of how far they had come. That night, as they left hand in hand, the city no longer felt like a kingdom to be ruled. It felt like a place to live. He had married for an heir, but in letting go of control, he gained something far greater. A life built not on obligation, but on love. And for the first time, everything truly began.